Good evening. Thank you everyone for coming back for Shabbat Table Season 2, Week 2. This week we will be discussing Parshas Vayeirah, which is this week's Parsha. And Parshas Vayeirah picks up right where last week's Parsha left off. Now we didn't discuss this because we can't get to everything in 1 week. But the end of last week's Parsha was the commandment that the Almighty gave to Abraham, of bris milah, of circumcision. And it's a whole discussion about what's the reasoning behind the mitzvah. It's a tremendous amount of work, and essays have been done to explain that. And we'll just do a short little synopsis of that because Parshas Vayeirah picks up right where that was. So the bris milah, as we know, is that every single child is born with extra skin, and on the 8th day, the skin is cut off. And the Minchas Chinuch, which is a great sefer written almost 1,000 years ago, the disciple of the the author is anonymous, but they believe he was a disciple of Nachmanides, or Ramban, as they say in Hebrew, or Moshe ben Ramban, or Moshe ben Nachman. And he explains that the mitzvah is to signify the obligation that a person has to come into this world and improve themselves and to perfect themselves. And therefore, just the same way we have personalities that we're always perfecting, so too with the body. The body, Hashem created specifically a person with something extra, and therefore that is done to be perfected. Now, the obvious question is, it had to be done in this manner, and this place, and all these details. So some of the explanations, the mefarshim, some of the explanations are, yes, specifically in the place, the part of a person in their reproductive area, because that is something that for thousands of years, ever since the creation of the world, mankind has struggled with challenges regarding immorality, and therefore specifically the Torah wanted to set something very, very ironclad, that we believe in human beings having discipline and being faithful, and therefore the Torah wanted to make that covenant specifically in that manner. So Abraham had his bris not on his 8th day like most people do today, but Abraham had his bris, his circumcision, much, much later on in his life, almost 100 years old. An old man. Now, granted, old man, but he lived to 175, so 90, something like that back then is not like it is today. Nevertheless, Abraham comes into this week's parsha wanting to have guests. We spoke about Avraham Avinu. He was the person who literally lived chesed. The person wanted to do as much kindness as possible. He is like every single rabbi's hero. Every single outreach person looks to Abraham and says, this guy, I shouldn't say that. This personality is the one that we look up to, because he literally personified and exemplified how a person to inspire other Jews and to rally other people behind him. And that's exactly what he did. He was the first person to show people the power of believing in Hashem and believing in God. In fact, I don't know if we said this last week or not, but I'll say it again anyways. Avraham is spelled Aleph, Beis, Resh, Hey, Mem, and the word Avraham has in it the word Aver. If you take the Aleph, Beis, Resh, which means opposite or the other side, and that is to show or to signify that Abraham was on the other side of the world. Abraham was like the only one that believed that there's one God. Everyone else in the generation believed that, today it's this and tomorrow it's that, and then all the idols. And there's, of course, the epic story when Abraham was this little child and he comes home one day and he breaks all the idols. He smashes them all up because his father was an idol merchant. Dad comes home and he says, what happened? And Abraham said, oh, Dad, you missed this. You missed what happened. These idols, they started going at each other. This guy said, no, I'm stronger. This idol said, I'm stronger. This idol said, I'm stronger. And they just got into a fight and they destroyed each other. And Abraham's dad said, come on, little son, you know that ain't true. And he said back, Dad, then why do you worship them? So that was the beginning of Abraham becoming the person who was on the other side of the world that believed in one Hashem. And then he took that and with chesed, with kindness, he preached it to so many people. So much so that even after his bris milah, even after his circumcision, He was standing outside the tent waiting for people that he could invite into his home for Hachnasas Archim, to have guests. That's the way he lived his life. And therefore, when his tent, we know, was open on 4 sides because he wanted people to come in. And by the way, of course, like we may have mentioned before, that's why when a couple gets married today, under a chuppah, a canopy is open on 4 sides, just like Abraham had, because we want to bring that message back home to have a home of chesed, like Abraham. Nevertheless, Abraham on day 3 is recovering from his bris milah and standing outside to have guests. Now, by the way, if anyone here has done some sort of excursion or some very strenuous work and they're sore, they're not sore necessarily right afterwards. They're sore the next day. You know, this past Sunday, I did some exercising that I have not done in a long time. And I'm telling you, so that day, I was all right. But the day afterwards, a little sore. The day after that, even more so. Even more. So that's what happens when a person is when a person has something happen to them, there's a delayed effect. So too over here, Avram Avinu is on day 3, the 3rd day of his bris milah. He's in the most intense pain, recovering from that, and he's sitting outside his tent to see if people come. So that's where we pick up this week's parsha. So it begins, and I'm going to read from you. It's Parshas Vayeirah. If you have a stone chumash, it's on page 78. And by the way, if anyone wants a stone chumash, let me know. We have a great way, a very cheap way for it to be ordered at a very affordable price, thanks to some friends who have a fund for this. I should have mentioned that last week, but let me know if anyone wants a copy of this blue chumash. Email me afterwards. Okay, now. So here it starts off. Vayeirah elav Hashem be'elono imamre v'hu yoshe pesach ha'oil k'chamayom. And God appeared to him, and the him is presumably Abraham. We'll talk about why it's just him in a moment. But God appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre, and he was standing at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. When of the day? The heat of the day. This old man, 3rd day after his bris milah, and he's standing out there, and he wants guests, and there's nobody coming, and Hashem appears to him. Why does Hashem appear to him? Rashi comments on this verse. Hashem appeared to Abraham levaker, to visit him, because there's a concept, there's a mitzvah of visiting the sick. So that being said, after that, some time passes, and Vayisa Eina Vayar, and Abraham, he looks up and he sees, and there are 3 men standing there. Like, what? I've been looking the whole day for people. Vayar, and he looked again, like, wants to make sure he really see this, right? And then it says, Vayaras the cross and the Pesach Olav Shachar is like, whoa, guest came, and he started running. He's like, I'm so happy to see people. 98-year-old, very old man, 3rd day bris milah, heat of the day. And then he says to them, my master, he says to them, if you're able to, please don't just keep on going. I want to bring you into my home and let me give you a meal so you could travel safely and be well fed and satiated. Yukach no matmayim, can you take some water? Wash yourselves up a little bit. Come sit with me under the tree. So, a lot of questions. So much to unpack over here. The first thing I want to say, and this is a beautiful thought, and it's actually very relevant to today, where we see ourselves in middle of an election season that we're going to probably remember. I'm sorry, did I just say the word election? I'm sorry. No, maybe some of you turned in to the Zoom so you don't have to think about the election, right? And comes the rabbi and brings it up in the class. Well, the Torah speaks to everything. So listen to what the Torah says over here. Vayisa ina vayar, and he lifted his eyes and he saw. That's what it says. And he saw. Then what did he see? 3 men standing there. And then what does the Torah say? Vayar, and he saw them. The Torah says vayar twice. And then what happened after he saw them for the 2nd time? Abraham ran towards them. Got that? Again, just to make sure everyone got this. Lifted his eyes and he saw. What did he see? 3 men standing there. Looked again, then he ran towards them. What, he had to look twice? His eyes weren't working. He doubted his vision. So Rashi picks up on them, and Rashi asks, why does it say Vayar? And he saw it twice. And Rashi says the following answer. Rishon kimashmo v'hasheni lashon havana, which in English means the first time Abraham saw, he just saw. He noticed. What was the second time? The second time he saw? Havana. He understood. He comprehended. He put it together. What did he realize? These people need my help. They don't want to bother me, so I need to be proactive. But that only happened after the second Vayar, after the second look. So what does that have to teach us? So I heard a beautiful thought from Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein, who's a great person, I've been fortunate to meet him a couple times, and he said a beautiful thought on this Rashi, that even Avraham Avinu, right, the greatest of the great, Abraham, did not realize something's true essence, what it needed from him, and its relevance to him, and how he can connect to it until he looked twice. And sometimes you and I, and maybe not so much us, but many other people, we look at someone and we say, this person, he for sure voted for that candidate. This person, he for sure affiliates with this synagogue organization. They're on the other side after just glancing at them. Oh, they do this? They belong there. Or they do that? They're one of these. We write them off. He's this, she's that. He's this, she's that. What does Rashi tell? What is the Torah telling us? Vayar, you got to look again. You know why? Because the second Vayar, the second looking is Lashon Havana. The second looking is when a person can sometimes comprehend. And it's happened so many times. Right now, I could tell you, even in the Kola, we interview different people. Sometimes the first interview, we interview someone, and I'm like, I don't really see it. They want a second interview. We do it again, like, okay, now I really see it. And it literally just happened a couple months ago, right? Sometimes we write people off, and it's being human. It's being human. But what the Torah is telling us is that always look again. You may conclude the same, you may not, but never to, God forbid, write someone off. Every single Jew is one of Hashem's children. He looks at us as many times as he needs to. So we follow suit, and we sometimes look again, because it's that second look, that second Vayar, we realize, we comprehend what its relevance is to us, and then it's Vayaras the cross, and we can run towards it because we realize what it can connect to us for. Okay, so then what does Abraham do? Abraham then sits them down. Now, who are these people? These people are not just people. Rashi tells them, Shloisha Malachim Hem. There are 3 angels. So now get the picture over here. You got these 3 angels that it's in the heat of the day, okay? Heat of the day, and what's going on here? Hashem wanted to send people to Abraham. Why? Hashem wanted to send people to Abraham because he wanted the mitzvah of Hachnasas Orchim. He wanted the mitzvah of having guests. So Hashem sent these angels. One second. How does that square? Having angels means you're inviting spiritual entities. They don't enjoy physical food. They're spiritual. They're what we call kulei ruchni. They're fully spiritual, right? Angels don't enjoy the food like you and I do, right? Sit down to a good ribeye, or for those who are more dairy heavy, good pasta, fettuccine alfredo, penne alla vodka, eggplant parmesan, fried mozzarella sticks with marinara sauce, right? All of these things, right? Justin, I see you nodding. Right? So all of these things, right? Angels don't enjoy them. You and I, we enjoy them. We have a good bite, l'chaim, and everything like that. Angels don't enjoy it. So once Hashem is sending people to Abraham, he couldn't send people that would enjoy it? All right, good question. So I heard a beautiful explanation from Rabbi Franz. And here's the explanation. Here's the lesson. It's so important because Avraham Avinu is the person who literally lives chesed. who lives kindness, who lives giving. And the Torah is telling us very specifically, giving does not mean the other person has to enjoy it. It's on you to become the giver. And just because someone else is not enjoying it as much doesn't go into your equation. It's about you becoming a giver. And the person transforming his, what we call selfishness, to selflessness. As we've spoken out in our dating and marriage series, for those who participated, the goal of a human being in terms of character development is to transform himself as an infant and baby that's totally self-centered, and then becomes into a child, a young adult, and married person, and then a parent and a grandparent, is a transformation of becoming a giver from an extreme taker, right? We spoke this out many times. And therefore, when it comes to chesed, it follows suit. That chesed is about making sure that you're giving. Oh, well, I don't know how much that person, that doesn't go into the equation. And I found precedents for this concept elsewhere in the Torah. Where else do we have this in the Torah? So we're going to fast forward now about 10 weeks or so in Sefer Shemos, Parshas Bo, I think. Or maybe, no, Parshas Vayeirah. Someone can fact check me later. I think it's in Parshas Vayeirah where Hashem has to command Moshe. This is by the plagues, by the way, okay? God commands Moses to what? To tell Aaron to hit the water or the sand. Two different plagues. But God commanded Moses to command Aaron to hit the water, and that will turn into blood. That was the Makkah, the plague of Dam, right? Of the water turning into blood. And of course, the question is, why did God here specifically tell Moses to command Aaron? The answer is, Rashi says, because the water saved Moshe's life. And out of hakaras hatov, out of recognizing the good and being a grateful person, Moshe could not be the one to hit the water. What's the question? You think the water has feelings that were hurt because you hit the water? Is that how it is? And the answer, of course, is like we're saying tonight. It's not about their feelings. It's about you doing the right thing irrespective of their feelings. Because the individual's obligation is to think, is this the right thing for me to do? Am I going to be sensitive to something that saved my life? Or back in this week's parsha, am I giving in an opportunity that I can give? That's the focus. How someone else takes it, that's not up to me. That's their life. That's their control. I can't control that. But the area that I could control, the area that I am in charge of, that I'm focused on. Much of life is really those two categories, right? Things I could control, things I can't control, right? Many things we can't control, right? Rav Shimshon Pincus, a great rabbi who passed a few years ago, once asked a great question, right? You're born boy or girl, that's not your choice. What class you are in, not your choice, pretty much. Parents maybe, but not your choice. How your family was when you were born, what type of parents that raised you, not your choice. The economy, not necessarily your choice. The weather, not your choice. Whoa, 1 second. What in this world is our choice? And he would say, you know what's our choice? How we respond to the things that is not our choice is our choice. So too over here, how someone's going to take a gift from us, how someone's going to receive our gratitude, that's not our choice. What is our choice? Are we being grateful? Are we being givers? And that's what the Torah is telling us. Focus in on that. Of course, therefore, when we give, we want to give something that they're going to enjoy. We do the best we can, right? We try to do what we think they're going to enjoy. This doesn't mean just, give them something that they're not going to like. This does remind me, I hope it's okay for me to say this, Rifki's not on, but I'll ask her later retroactively. But I remember one of our first, second year we were married, and I don't know what it was, Hanukkah, Thanksgiving, whatever, and I got her a gift, and I got her a Keurig. And she looked at it and said, thank you. I'm like, yeah, don't you like it? She's like, did you buy this for me or for you? And for all those who see me at Starbucks a lot know what I mean. And it hit me later. I didn't buy her a gift. I bought myself a gift, right? Because, of course, when we buy someone a gift or we do something for someone else, we have to think about what they would appreciate. But that's where it stops. What happens afterwards? That's not our control. What is our control? Are we becoming givers? Are we becoming people that are grateful? How they'll perceive it, I don't know. But that's not what's up to us. And that's why specifically here in this week's Parsha, Hashem sends angels, because Hashem's setting the record straight with Avraham, who is the one who personifies chesed, the one who exemplifies chesed. Specifically by him, Hashem wanted to make sure we got what the message is about chesed, and that's about the person becoming a giver. Now, with this understanding, we can read the next couple verses and see a beautiful idea. And that is as follows. The pasuk begins, and Hashem appeared to him. Who's the him? Presumably Abraham. And he was sitting at the tent of the entrance tent. Who's the he? Presumably Abraham. Okay, next verse. He lifted his eyes and he saw. Who lifted his eyes and who saw? Again, probably Abraham. He saw they were standing there and he ran towards them. Who's the he? Again, probably Abraham. He spoke to them and said, where you go? Can you please come to me? Who spoke to them? It says he spoke to them. Who's the he? Right? Probably Abraham. Okay? Finally, they agree to come. And then what happens next? By Maher Avraham el Hela el Sarah. Abraham hurried to the tent and spoke to Sarah and said, quickly come, let's prepare shloshim kemach soles, let's prepare the flour and make food and bread for them. And then he slaughtered, and then he got them some meat. But specifically, after he corresponded with them, did Abraham have his name appear in the Torah. Until then, he said, he did this, he saw, he ran, he sat. Then comes Pasuk Vav, the 6th verse, by Maher Avraham, and Abraham ran. So what's going on here? Why is it? Of course, we know the Torah is so specific. The Torah is so detailed. What's the Torah teaching us here? So I heard a beautiful explanation, a beautiful thought. And they're all beautiful, but this one specifically. And that is as follows. Until Abraham came into his tent, he was involved with chesed. And the Torah is telling us that when a person is doing some public help, when a person is trying to do good for the people, try to keep a low profile. Try to keep your name out of it. Do a lot. Like we say, do a lot and say a little. Or say a little and do a lot, really. I think the order is. But, right? Keep your name down. The kavod, we don't need the name and the honor. Try to keep that down. And that's what the Torah is telling us. Oh, then what's the switch? But when it comes to your family, make sure they know that you have a lead role in doing chesed. Make sure that you can be seen doing chesed, so you set an example for your family, set an example for your household. So until then, it's he said, he sat, he ran, he spoke. Low profile. Abraham's name is not front and center. When it comes to running in the tent, no. It's by Mara Abraham. He's setting the tone for his home. I'm doing chesed. Come, rally behind me. Help me out. Let's prepare food for them. Because Abraham is doing something that every parent wants to do, and that is set a tone by leading with example, not leading with speech. And of course, this gets into the concept of chinuch, the concept of child raising, the concept of raising children with our ideas, and the great educators, the Bali Musar, the great Jewish educators and scholars, and most notably Reb Shlomo Wolbe of Jerusalem, who passed away about 15 years ago. He wrote a whole book on this, and it's called, and he basically breaks it down into two categories, and that is binyan and zriya. Binyan means building, proactive, getting involved, and zriya, which means planting. What does that mean, planting? Planting means that you're not overtly telling them. You're not stepping in and doing something. You're leading with example. And over a very long period of time, it sinks in. And then they want to do it. Not because you told them to, because they saw how much you do it. All the time, every single morning, I leave to the kollel, and my 4-year-old says, "Are you going to the kollel now? Are you going to daven? Are you going to pray now?" Right? He asks me every single morning, and I hope that when he gets older, I'm not going to even need to tell him, because he sees me, and I'm sure every single one of you could think of something that your parents did something positive, and you wanted to do it just because you saw them. They didn't need to tell you, right? And then there's the other type of child raising where something happens and you need to step in and intervene. That's binyan. That's being constructive and proactive. If a child runs in the middle of the street, you have to do something about it, right? And of course, we'd rather not have to do it. Of course, if we have to, we will. But we, as people who set an example, people who are educators, we much rather teach them by leading by example. It's each individual case may be a drop less effective, but accumulatively much more powerful. And that's what the Torah is telling us over here. Vaymar Avraham, he's setting an example for his family. He doesn't need to preach it. He's just doing it. He's leading the way. People see him. Of course, he didn't have Yitzchak born at the time, but nevertheless, he still wants his home to take that lead role of what he's doing. So what happens after that? The angels come and the angels bless Abraham. The 3 angels, each one had its own purpose, because we know an angel cannot have 2 jobs, so to speak. So one of them was to help and heal Abraham. That was Malach Rephal, the angel of healing. Another one was to warn him about Sodom, the city that was destroyed. We're not going to necessarily have time for that tonight, but we'll save that for next year, season 3. And the third, the third angel was to bless Abraham and Sarah to have a child, and that was eventually going to be Yitzchak, Isaac. But there's a little episode that happened subsequently. So what happened? The angel came and blessed them. You're going to have a child. You're going to have a son to Sarah, your wife. The Sarah Shamas, and Sarah heard this. Sarah heard this blessing that she's going to have a child. By the way, 90-something years old, never had children. She hears she's going to have a child, okay? Setting records. What happens? The Torah tells us, Vatitzchak, Sarah Bekirba Lemar, Sarah on a certain level, hard for us to understand because these people were so great. But whatever level it was, Sarah laughed a little bit. She laughed at herself, saying, after all this time that I've withered, I'm gonna have a child, and my husband's so old. We can't have children now. But how did she finish? My husband's so old. Okay. Abraham didn't hear this. What happened was, Vayomer Hashem el Avraham, the Almighty appeared to Abraham, and what did the Almighty say? Lama zet sochaka Sarah lemor. Why is Sarah laughing, saying, Ha'af unam ele va'ani zakanti? Why is Sarah saying that she's too old to have a child? You hear this? God is telling Abraham, why is Sarah saying that she's too old to have a child? But one second, what did Sarah really say? Sarah really said, Va'adoni zaken, my husband, so he's too old, not me, he's the problem, right? No, I'm kidding. But she was saying that he's the one that's too old, but that's not what God says. Is Hashem not saying the truth? God forbid, how can we even say such a thing, right? But is that what's going on here? So of course, Rashi picks up on this. The great commentary, French commentary that lived from 1040 to 1105. Rashi comments on this. Pasuk says, Mishana mipnei hashalom. That Hashem changed it a little bit to help pursue and promote peace, harmony between Abraham and Sarah. Which is like, whew, what? Did I hear this right? And the Torah is teaching us such a valuable lesson that even at 90-something years old, they are working on their shalom bayis. They are improving their relationship because it's not something that's just about the Sheva Brachos, the week a person gets married. It's not something that's just the Shana Rishona, the first year of marriage, or until they have their first child or their last child. The last child gets out of the home and graduates, and we don't have to see anyone again for the rest of our lives. We go on vacation for the rest of our lives and go on honeymoons for the rest of our lives. No. Until 90-something years old, Shalom Bayis, having a harmony, a relationship of harmony, is front and center. That's number one. Number two, we see from here the concept of changing something to promote peace. But there's a big caveat. There's a big asterisk, limitations to that. We learn from here a person is allowed to change a detail in a story, but you cannot create a story. Meaning to say there is wiggle room a little bit for changing something for shalom, for peace, but does not give us liberty to concoct something out of thin air and make a whole conspiracy story to get yourself out of something, right? That's not what's going on. That's not what the Torah is allowing. And the third thing is that it's something that you could change that's not going to come back to haunt you. It's not like Abraham's going to find out later. You know what I mean? So it's okay. But the question still stands. How is it that Hashem, what do we say every single one? Hashem Elokechem emes v'yatzev, right? We say Hashem is the one of truth. The world stands on truth. Like the Mishnah on Pirkei Avos, the Mishnah that tells us in ethics of our fathers, the world, Ashlosha Devarim Ha'olam, Kayam, Din, Emes, and Shalom. There are three things that sustain the world. Din, which judgment and justice, Emes, truth, and Shalom, and peace. So 1 second, how can you tell me that the world is fulfilled with truth, yet Hashem is saying something that's a drop? Okay, I understand it's for good reasons, it's good intentions, but still, it's not the Emes, as they say. So I heard a beautiful explanation. I believe it comes from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, I believe. I heard it in his name. And that Emes is not merely what the truth is. Rather, Emes is also what is the Ratzon Hashem? What is the will of God? What is the thing that Hashem wants from me in this moment right now? That is Emes. That consistency, thinking straight and not wavering from what we believe Hashem wants from us, that is Emes. And in this case, that means she said, not he said, right? Or he said and not she said, right? That's what the Torah is teaching us. In fact, if you take the word Emes, you take that word, you spell it out, it's Aleph, Mem, Tuf. Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, the Aleph base, Tuf, Mem, the middle letter, right, pun intended, the middle letter of the Aleph base, and Tuf, the last letter of the Aleph base, to teach us, yes, to look straight in order, consistent. What is the Ratzon Hashem? What is the will of God? And sometimes in different areas, that means different things. And we have to be very, what we call intellectually honest. Am I fooling myself in what Hashem wants from me? Or am I just selling myself on a lie that this is what Hashem wants from me? And if I don't know if I'm being intellectually honest, I can ask someone who has my best interest at heart, who's not biased towards one way to like keep me in check, right? Because Emes is about making sure the will of God is pursued and achieved. The last thing I'm going to leave you with tonight is the end of this week's Parsha. The very, very end is the famous story and episode of Akedas Yitzchak. So what goes on in Akedas Yitzchak? The offering of Isaac, which is Abraham's only child from Sarah, I should say, because he had Jeshmal from Hagar, but from Sarah, Isaac was his only child. And what does Hashem say? So if you look in chapter 22, Pasuk Aleph, chapter 22, the first Pasuk, the first verse, it says, was after these matters, and Hashem Nisa es Avram, Hashem tested Abraham. Vayomer Elav, and Hashem said to him, Avram, Vayomer Nene, Hashem said to him, Avram, are you there? And he said, yes, I'm here. What did Hashem say? Vayomer Kach Noah es Binchas Yichidcha Asher Ahavta es Yitzchak V'lech Lecha Al Haaretz Moriah. Hashem said, take your son, your only son, your son that you love, your son Isaac, and go to the Eretz Moriah V'aleu Sham La'olah, and bring him up there. Allah and Aharon, one in the mountains, that I'm going to tell you. Okay. Two very big questions. They're staring at us. First of all, can anyone tell me which two words in this verse look awfully familiar? Like, what? Is this a throwback? Can anyone tell me? What does it say again? Vayomer, Hashem said to him, Kach Noah es bincha, take your son es Yichidcha, your only son, Asher Ahavta, that you love, es Yitzchak, your son Yitzchak, V'lech Lecha Al Haaretz Moriah, and go to the land of Moriah, V'alei Sham La'olah, and bring him up there as an offering, Allah Harim, one of the mountains, Asher Amar Lecha, that I tell you. So what stares at you?
Right?
That's right. Last week's Parsha comes up in this pasuk. Lech Lecha. What's going on here? Is this like a throwback, a pun intended? Hashem's throwing a joke out here? What's going on? That's one question. The second question is, what is this type of wording over here? As bincha, your son. Okay. As yichidcha, your only son. Asher ahavta, that you love. As Yitzchak. Why don't you just say Yitzchak to begin with? Your son, your only son that you love. Oh, yeah, that's Yitzchak. So Rashi, there's a famous medrash on teaching on this, that Hashem said there was a whole dialogue between God, between the Almighty Hashem and Abraham. First Hashem said, bring your son. And Abraham's like, which one? I have two sons. I have Yishmael and I have Yitzchak. Hashem said, your only son. And Abraham said back, 1 second, each one's an only child. This one's one to his mother. This one is a one child to his mother. Right? Then it continues. Asher ahavta, that you love. Okay. What does Abraham say? I love them both equally. Right? You hear that? I love them both equally. Yeah, we've all heard our parents say, I love all my children equally. And we're like, yeah, I'm sure, right? No, but Avram really meant it, right? Hashem said to Avram, the one that you love. And Avram's like, I love them both equally. And if you think about it for a second, how is that possible? How is it possible that that Avraham loves them both equally? Yishmael was, a little iffy. Yitzchak, whoo, he was your straight A student, right? And he's saying to Hashem, I love them both equally, right? And of course, the answer is, we've spoken up before in other classes and in different contexts, that love is built. Love, one does not fall in love merely, but love is built over time through giving. And we just learned in the beginning of the Parsha how much of a giver Abraham was to guests. You can only imagine how much more so to his own child. So therefore, to him, I love them both. I give anything I can to both of them. Fascinating idea. Right now we know why he's Avraham Avinu. He's our forefather Abraham, the great patriarch. In fact, anyone know when we read this Parshas Vayeirah, you know when else we read this? We read this this verse. We also read it on Rosh Hashanah. If you remember and you recall and you pay attention next year, no, don't worry. You don't have to pick up the 800-page master for a long time. But when that time comes, you'll see that I think it's the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the second day. I think the first day of Rosh Hashanah, this is what we read. We read this Parsha. I believe there's a message there, specifically Rosh Hashanah, because sometimes Rosh Hashanah, the high holiday season, is the season of Jewish guilt, right? We could all relate to that. And right? And why do you have so much Jewish guilt? And if you don't have Jewish guilt, you blame yourself, right? You heard all these jokes already, right? But we specifically read this parsha, I believe, on Rosh Hashanah to remind ourselves, no matter what type of Jew we were this past year, whether we think of ourselves as a Yitzchak or we think of ourselves as a Yishmael, Hashem says, Asher Ahavta, I love you both the same. Don't give up. I'm still invested on you. Right? Maybe that's the reason why we read on Rosh Hashanah, perhaps. Nevertheless, but that's what's going on here in this pasuk. And then what happens, of course, he brings him to the altar, he's about to slaughter him, and Hashem stops him, and Hashem says, bring a ram instead. And that's, of course, of the shofar, that we get the shofar. And of course, that's why we read the shofar. We not read the shofar, excuse me. We blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah because we're tapping into what our forefathers left for us, what we call zechus chaste avos, the merits, the zechus, the merits of our forefathers. But the other question is, what's this concept of lech lecha, this go take for you? So I'm going to tell you a thought. I think this might be, literally, I know I say this a lot, but I really mean it. This could be a life-changing thought. It's changed my life on a very practical level. And I promise you it could do the same for you. Listen closely. Chazal tell us, our rabbis tell us, that the reason why the Torah specifically used the words lech lecha of last week's parsha fame here is to teach us that that last lech lecha is just like this one. What does that mean? Because that lech lecha was the first, as we said last week, is the first of the 10 tests of Abraham. Those were the first, the 10 tests. And this lech lecha is the 10th test. Abraham had 10 tests. That was the first. Leave your birthplace, your land and your father's house, right? Go to Eretz Moriah, go to Eretz Canaan, right? Which is, of course, going to be the state of Israel. We spoke that out last week. That was an assignment. That was a test. And why are we using the same wording here? Because lech lecha is teaching us that one is just like this one, that they were just as hard. The nisayon harishon k'nisayon ha'acharon, Rashi says. The last test is like the first test. But if you think about it, how can that be? How can that last test be anywhere close? How can it be anywhere close to the first test? So, to understand this, we have to know, what is a test? What's a test all about? So here we go. What happens? What is the word for test? So for the pasuk was that after these matters, Ha'elokim nisa es Avram, the Almighty tested Abraham. What's a test? Oh yeah, test. Oh, what's a test? So I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it's all about. And then we're going to come to use this to answer the lech lecha part. And it's going to be a beauty. I'm sure we could think of many differences between human beings and animals. But there's one main difference that separates us from animals. And of course, animals could be great. They could be fun. They could be yummy. They could be so much connection. But there is a difference. And that difference in Hebrew is known as bechira chafshis, which means free will, which means that human beings have the ability to rise above our nature, improve, change, and perfect something. Now, of course, you could train an animal to do something too, don't get me wrong. But the conscious decision that we're going to delay, let's say, instant gratification, that if it's Yom Kippur today, I'm not going to eat. And if it's time for me to get up and go to work, I'm not going to snooze the alarm clock. That type of discipline of critical thinking to overcome and be conscious and utilize free will is something that was given to human beings. It's called, as the Rebbeinu Yonah, the great sage of the 10th century, calls it, Maila El Yonah, is something specific that Hashem gave to human beings. Not to say that animals, that we don't care for animals. Of course, we have to take care of them. There's something called Sar Bali Chaim. One's not allowed to cause or inflict pain on an animal also. We have to treat them as God's creations. But nevertheless, human beings do have this added and elevated component of free will. But the question is, when do we utilize free will? When does a person get to utilize this concept of bechira chafshis, free will? If someone offers me Diet Coke or Diet Sprite, am I utilizing free will? If I'm offered the room to be at 68 degrees or 69 degrees, is that utilizing free will? No. Free will is utilized when I have the freedom and the will to overcome something, to change something. When does that happen? That happens when someone is tested, when they're in a circumstance where for them, they have a level of adversity. And what do? They rise to the occasion, overcome that obstacle, and they're able to overcome and then pass, so to speak, the test. Person worked on himself, improved, spent the time, the effort, completed it, and then overcame it, passes the test. That's utilizing free will. When does someone have that? Like we said, that happens when someone is tested. What's the Hebrew word for test? Nisa, nun samache. Hold that thought. Hold that for a second. Let's make a left turn for a second. And it's gonna, I'm telling you, I promise you, bear with me, it's gonna come together. What is a miracle? If I ask you to define a miracle, what is a miracle? So the answer is a miracle is a change of nature. When X was supposed to happen and Y happened, right? A miracle, right? You'll see my team was so down and they're never gonna win. He's gonna have to throw a Hail Mary. A miracle will happen, he'll win, right? But that just doesn't happen usually. That's why it's a miracle, change of nature. When a person is tested, right? Let's take dieting, for example, right? It's pretty common, right? That's a constant test, right? Should I eat this or should I not eat this? Or should I have a second portion of this or not, right? All these things, right? That's a test. My nature is to want to have another bite. My nature is to want to do this, but I rise above my nature and say no, utilize free will, discipline. Changing nature is a miracle, but changing a person's personal nature is also overcoming a test. What was the Hebrew word for test? Nisa. What are the first two letters of that word? Nes, nun samach, which means miracle. Like Hanukkah, we say Nes Gadol Hayasham. There was a great miracle that happened on the dreidel, right? The nun samach, right? Because when a person passes a test, they're creating miniature miracles because they overcame, or they were able to overcome their innate personal nature. So you and I, on a certain level, we can become miracle makers in our world, in ourselves. Miracle makers by overcoming our nature when we are faced with a test. We rise to the occasion. Because every single time that happens, we're strengthening a muscle. And if that's the case, now I understand why the first Lech Lecha and the second and the last Lech Lecha, which at first glance seems so far apart. No way these two things could be the same. They're so far away from each other. The first one is talking about leaving somewhere, and the last one is talking about giving up your son, which of course he didn't do in the end. But nevertheless, that was the beginning, that was the test. You know why? Because every single time you strengthen yourself, there's more muscle mass. And you get stronger and stronger. You know, when a person wants to start working out, they go to the gym. The first weight they pick up, they don't pick up the 50-pound weight. They're not going to lift that. They pick up the 10-pound weight. You know what happens after you start using the 10-pound weight for a couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months? It becomes light. You got to move on to the 15 or 20-pound weight. Do the same thing, couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months. You got to move on to the next one. But when you pick up that 20-pound weight, it's much heavier than the 10-pound, but the level of adversity, the personal level of adversity is the same. The degree of challenge is the same. And that's what the Torah is teaching us here. As Abraham passed one test after another test, rising above his nature again and again, rising above his nature again and again, climbing that ladder, he had such muscle mass, such spiritual muscle mass. After performing all of those miracles, that last test was like the first test. And that's the meaning behind the Hebrew word for test. Nisa es Avram, Hashem tested Abraham, his nes is miracle, because all of us, you and I together, create miracles. How? by changing our nature, by overcoming a circumstance, overcoming a challenge. And really, that's what we know is life is all about. Every single person you know has tests in their life. They are tested with people. We call them friends and family, right? Jokes aside, we have tests all the time. And all of us have the ability, not just get by it, but to raise our nature and become a miracle maker with it. And that's the beauty and the lesson that we walk away with after learning the Parsha of Akedas Yitzchak. So with that, pretty packed week. Hope I didn't go too long. Hopefully this will be recorded. If anyone wants the recording, let me know, because we had a couple people that asked for it. And thanks again for coming on. Again, I'll send it out in the email, but just so you know, pick up tomorrow for all those who would like. Please come and pick up a Shabbat dinner somewhere between 12 and 3. Just please text me when you're on your way so I can make sure it's all nice and ready for you. And it's a pleasure being here to do this with you. Thank you all for joining us and wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.